Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kate and today I'm going to be teaching you how to paint this easy watercolor cardinal. Let's get started. So we are going to start with drawing out our cardinal, and we are just going to draw a very simple side view of our cardinal, and he's just going to be sitting on a branch in the snow. So the very first thing to do is draw a small circle for the cardinal's head. So you want the circle to start a little bit more than halfway toward the right, and then draw a very light cross in the center. This is just going to give us some guidelines for our cardinal's head. So now that we have this cross in place, we know where the center is, and the little top part that the cardinal has is going to start a little bit more toward the left than the center. Just going to come up and it's going to curve down toward the front. It's just going to kind of blend in to that circle. And then with the beak is going to start a little bit above the halfway point. You basically want that halfway point to be in the middle of your beak. So just like that. And then what we're going to do, underneath this circle, we're going to draw a larger circle for the cardinal's body. And again, just draw these very lightly because we are going to erase a lot of these lines, and we don't want any heavy lines to show through with our watercolors. Right now I'm drawing this straight onto my watercolor paper. Alright, and then what you're going to do once you have this middle circle in place, you're going to start at the beak and you are going to connect this circle and the top circle with a curved line. We're going to do the same thing over here, starting right above that halfway point and just curving it downward into that circle. And then we are going to add a tiny little semicircle off the back of the main body area, and then we are going to draw a little tail like that. And we're going to sharpen some of these things up, and the feet are going to come out here. They kind of angle instead of just going completely straight down. Alright, and so now what we can do is add the details to the face. So I'm just going to make some little jaggedy lines to kind of create the feathers around the bird's head. And then starting a little bit above where the beak starts, I'm going to make a little bit more of those jagged lines. And then I'm going to just kind of curve around right before I leave that first little triangle. And then I'm going to bring that down, so curved in, and then I'm going to bring it down into this neck area. And then I'm going to just draw in a little eye right there. And then to finish off our beak, I'm going to do the same jagged lines, kind of coming to that middle line that we have drawn for our guidelines, and then I'm going to come down. And then from that middle line, you can create a little separation for the two parts of the beak. So there is our cardinal's head. And then we're going to do the wing, which is going to start right below that top of the circle. We're just going to kind of create little lines that are going to create the curved shape of our wing. And this wing is going to come all the way down to the tail. So just like that. Just make that kind of curved triangular shape. It kind of looks like a carrot. And then we're going to do those same little jagged lines connecting this tail. I mean, it's really feathers, but it just looks like a tail to me. Just to soften that area. And then I'm going to curve this a little bit. I just don't like how bulged out that was. So I'm just going to kind of curve that down. All right, so this is our basic sketch for our cardinal. Now what you can do is erase the in-between lines that were like our guidelines and just leave the main features of the cardinal. And you just want to erase basically everything, because again, we want everything to just kind of blend when we add our paint. So just erase every line to where you can barely see it. And then we can begin painting. All right, now that we have our sketched out bird, we can begin painting in our cardinal. So I'm just going to take my round brush and I'm going to take my Alzerian Crimson paint. And to start, I am just going to fill in the entire cardinal with this paint color. And I want to use a pretty wet paint. I don't really want it to be too dry, because while it is wet, I want to go back in and add some darker tones. But if your paper does dry very fast, just naturally, you can just re-wet it and go back in with some darker tones to get the same blended look that we're going to be going for with this technique. All right, we're just avoiding that top space that we outlined with the eye and right in front of the beak, so just kind of avoid that with your paint as best as you can. A lot of it we are going to come back in with black around the eye, so that will cover up any mistakes if you accidentally go into that area. So coming back down, just kind of re-wetting this, because I can tell it's already drying on my page as well. Just coming around the belly. So don't worry that we're not putting too much detail into it right now. We are going to come back with more coats and layers to really give that detail. All right, so while this bird is still wet, I have mixed up a darker tone of red using Alzerian Crimson, a little bit of green, and a little bit of burnt sienna. And while this is wet, I'm going to tap that in to this wing. Right now, it might not show up super boldly, but I want that base color there for when we add more detail later. And I'm going to do that same color down into the tail. And then I'm going to take the smallest amount of Payne's Gray, and I'm just going to tap that color in right under that wing. And I'm just going to blend that out. This is just to give that base layer of shadowing. Again, this is a very wet layer, and it's kind of just like the basis for our cardinal's colors. So we're going to let this dry, and then we're going to come back with some more detail. Now that our first layer has dried, we can go back in with our second coat. And with this one, we are going to do a more wet on dry technique. With the first one, we did a more wet on wet. So I'm going to take that same original Alzerian paint color and I'm going to reapply it to the top part of our bird. So for this, it's just like adding a second coat. And it's a pretty even mixture. It's not super watery, but it has enough water in it where it's going to make it easy to blend as we go down. So then when I get to the wing, I'm going to avoid it. I'm going to come around. So just keeping that same color and just avoiding the wing. And I'm going to go up around its belly. Just trying to blend all this paint together so it dries nice and evenly. I am going to come down into the tail. And then I'm going to switch back to that darker paint color we used earlier. And I'm going to apply it to the wing area. And I'm not worried about these colors blending. If they accidentally touch, it's okay. I'm just going to carry that and I'm going to curve it for the wing. And then I'm actually going to take this part, kind of just blend it out. Just that top part, because I don't want it to look like the wing is completely separate from the rest of the body. And then I'm going to take that same dark red paint and I'm going to tap it into the tail part of our bird. And then I'm going to clean my brush off and just kind of blend it out like that. All right, and we are going to let this layer dry and then we're going to come back. Now that our last layer has dried, we are going to mix up some Payne's Gray with that Alzerian Crimson paint. So we really want it to be mainly Payne's Gray with just a hint of red. Just a really nice dark tone. And this is where we're going to add in our details with our feathers. So I'm going to start with the wing, and I'm just going to very loosely with quick line motions, just kind of outline that wing. So I don't want it to be a straight line. I want them to have like curved little lines making up the wing to really give the appearance of the feathers. And I want them to be thin. I don't want fat lines. I'm going to put a little bit more Payne's Gray into my red. I'm going to do the same thing down here with the tail area. With this one, I'm going to just kind of come up down the right side. And just kind of let that come down and around. And then I'm going to stop coming up this way, and then I'm going to switch over to up here. Take a little paint off my brush. Just kind of let it curve into the belly like this. Just again, those quick line motions, just kind of curving to give that detail. Do the same thing up here with the little point at the top. Just kind of make those little lines. same to the chest area, very lightly, very thin to add that detail. Just like that. And then I'm going to take just a little bit more Payne's Gray and add it to that same mixture. So this one's going to be pretty dark. And I'm going to come back in here right under the wing with those really quick line motions, just to give a little bit more depth to the wing. And down here as well, just to give a little bit more layering look. All right. Now we are going to add the beak color and fill in our eye. So I already have my burnt sienna mixed up over here, and this is going to be the color for the beak. So all we're going to do is just fill in that beak with that color. Using my small detail brush for this, just so I get a nice point. I'm going to drop in some darker pigment. All right, just like that. And then I'm going to go into that Payne's Gray paint color that we used earlier, and I'm going to get a very thick wash of it on the tip of my brush. If you're worried about your control with a small detail like the eye, you can always use a waterproof ink pen, and that will give you the control you need if you're worried about not being able to get a nice small eye. I'm just going to fill in that eye, leaving a little tiny space on the left side that's going to stay white. Just like that. And then while we're here with this paint color, I'm going to go down into the legs. And I'm just going to fill them in. Just like that. All right, we're going to let the beak and the eye completely dry before we finish out our bird's face. Now that our eye and nose have completely dried, we are just going to make a lighter mixture of that Payne's Gray paint. So not too much lighter, but we want it to be a little bit lighter than our eye. And then we are going to fill in the rest of this face area with that paint. And since it's a little bit lighter, we can come right up around our eye, and we don't have to worry about it not showing through. When you come up around the tip of the face, just kind of make it more uneven. You don't want it to really look smooth. You want it to still look like feathers. I'm just going to go back through to darken up the paint. Just like that. And I'm going to take a little bit more of a darker, thicker tone of the Payne's Gray with the tip of my brush. And with a very light hand, I'm just going to use tip of my brush to kind of redefine where the middle of the beak is. And again, for that step, if that makes you nervous, feel free to just use a black ink pen. You don't have to use your paintbrush. All right, and now what we're going to do is we're going to let this dry, and then we're going to add a nice background, a wintry background to our cardinal. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to take some clean water on our brush and just start filling in the area around our cardinal. You don't have to worry about this being perfect around the edges, just kind of fill in as close as you can get without touching the cardinal. I'm going to go under as well because he's going to be up in a branch. You really don't want your paper to pool, so just try to create an even amount of water. All right, and then you're going to grab a nice light blue paint color, and we're going to start on the outside and kind of blend our way down to where the cardinal is. So we want the darker color toward the outside, and we want it to get lighter as it gets closer to our bird. You can also use washi tape for this step. I usually do, but I was just going to try to make it feel more loose by not having perfect edges. I'm going to kind of stick with a curved edge look, just to try to make it consistent. And having our page wet before is really going to help all of these colors blend and not feel too sharp as we try to blend it all around. I'm leaving some space for where I want to add a tree branch, and then I'm just going to repeat that same process down here. Just kind of keeping those edges curved. Then I'm just going to blend out right there. Just like that. All right. And we're going to let this background completely dry, and then we're going to come in and add our branch, and then we're going to finish it off with adding some snow onto our branch and into our sky. And now we are going to add our tree branch. So I just mixed up some Payne's Gray and some burnt sienna, and then I am just going to fill in this area that I already separated for my tree branch. The nice thing about adding a tree branch, it doesn't need to be superly straight or even. It can be very wobbly looking, and that gives it more of a natural feel and look. Just like that, kind of letting it come off the page. And then we are going to add snow to our branch, but while this dries, we can go ahead and add snow to our sky. So I'm going to switch to my small detail brush, and I'm going to load it up with a lot of white paint. And then very closely to the page, I'm just going to tap in that white paint. I may come back in with some white acrylic paint because this blue is so bright, I feel like it may not show as well. But we did do our splatter, so I think I will be coming back in with some white acrylic paint. So now what we're going to do is we're going to let our tree branch dry, and we're going to come back in with some white acrylic paint or white ink, and we are going to add some snowy details to finish off our painting. This last step is completely optional if you don't have white acrylic paint or white ink, so I think it looks great just like this if you want to leave it like this. I decided last minute that I want to add some pine needles to our tree, so I'm going to mix up a very bluish green paint color. I'm going to add some Payne's Gray to the green, and then a little bit of blue. I'm doing this on my small detail brush, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to add one behind and then one right in front. So I'm just going to add those quick line motions coming out to make up the pine needle shape. If you're a subscriber and follower of my channel already, you've already done this type of pine needle leaf with me. And if you haven't seen that before, you can head over to my channel and you can check out in detail over there exactly how I did this pine needle leaf with a pine cone. So I'm going to add that right there, and then I'm going to add another one coming off this way. So I'm going to make that first line, and then I'm going to add the pine needles. I think this painting just needed a little bit more depth and detail to it, some more interest, and I think adding these pine needle leaves is really going to kind of give it some more interesting detail. I think I'm going to add one more, kind of coming off right back here. This one's going to be tucked in behind the cardinal. And then one more is going to come off right here. And then I think, I'm sorry, I just keep adding them. I'm going to add another one right here, kind of coming out of the page. I think adding that really creates a lot of depth to the painting and a lot more interest. Perfect. I'm going to add a little bit of Payne's Gray to that green. And I'm just going to add a second coat over the pine needles just very quickly. I'm not going to go too in detail, especially because it's not the main focus of the painting, but I still want my pine needles to have that layered look to them. Just like that. And then what we're going to do is we are going to take that white acrylic paint and I'm going to add it to my small detail brush. And I'm just going to tap that in along the base of the tree, just for some resting snow. Especially over here where I left a lot of white space. Just kind of clumping it in random spots. I'm going to add a little bit of it onto the pine needles, kind of like a dry brush. So just kind of glazing over with what I had left on my paintbrush. Gives it that dry brush look. And then I'm going to water down that white acrylic paint quite a bit so that I can splatter it all over my painting. So now I'm just going to cover up my cardinal with some scrap piece of paper, and then I'm going to take that white acrylic paint that I watered down, and I'm just going to tap that in all around my painting to give me some actual white snow that you can see on this very light blue paint color. And then I'm going to clean my brush off so that I don't ruin my watercolor brush with the acrylic paint. And then I'm going to take a little bit of paper towel and dab off this really big blob I got. But everything else I think looks really great. And you can just remove your paper. And there you have a wintry scene with a watercolor cardinal. Hey everyone, thanks for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. If you did, please subscribe to this channel and give this video a thumbs up. If you'd like any extra details on this painting, like the specific paint colors I used or supplies that I used, head over to my blog, Reflecting Creation. I'll have a link in the description box below. Hope to see you again soon. Bye.